Hello, Antiochian men. This is Michael Bocklig with another interview in our series of interviews on our DOMSE Antiochian Men YouTube channel. This time, we'll be interviewing one of the men in our diocese, Deacon Adam Roberts. Deacon Adam, thank you for joining us today.
I'm honored to be on here and talk with you. I hope that whatever I share is edifying.
I'm sure it will be. Deacon Adam, would you mind starting out by just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Married with 3 kids. They're all still home. I have a boy that's 14 and 2 girls that are 12 and 10. I'm a Lebanese convert, which means I identify with the ethnic roots of our archdiocese, but I'm also a convert. My family joined when I was 15 years old. So I also understand what it means to be a convert in the Orthodox Church. Which has been a blessing, really. Actually, being a Lebanese convert has helped me connect with people, over the last 20 years. And I've always had a desire to serve, and I've been involved in some extra way, one way or the other, since I became Orthodox at 15, obviously for a few years as an altar boy. Then I got involved with back then it was a region, but our diocesan organizations. I'm one of the founders of Camp St Thecla of our diocese, and was the first camp director for that after I gladly gave it over to Bishop Thomas because he knew what he was doing. He saved my day, and then he let me stay on, and I was thankful for that. And so I'm thankful for the camp and what it's become. But I'm just another guy in our diocese who never wants to be satisfied with living a complacent life.
That makes sense. It's well said. And I can relate to being an altar boy. I was myself for many years. I know you have a job with our Archdiocese and that you work in the Department of Missions and Evangelism. I wanted to ask you if you could just talk a little bit about what your responsibilities are with that position.
Sure, yeah. My official title is content creator, and that was because my boss wanted to be able to use me for anything. But my primary purpose, I would say, is to make movies for the Archdiocese. When I was involved with the Becoming Truly Human ministry, and we showed that film to the Metropolitan, he picked up his phone and he pointed at his phone and he said, "This is how we're going to reach America." And it gave me chills because I knew he was right. I knew he was 100% right that we need to be present on people's smart devices, on their phones, on their tablets, as a church. And so that kind of planted a bug in me that I'm like, I want to do this. And because I'm an evangelist first, that medium can change. 50 years ago, it may not have been a movie. It could have been something else. But right now, getting on that small screen is really important. And so that motivated me to want to make documentaries, to be a content creator, to provide resources that are of quality and are helpful to our churches in sharing the gospel with America. So that's my primary job, is how do I come up with stuff? And I don't really come up with stuff. I borrow from smarter people. And that's my whole ministry has been from day one. I'm always trying to find someone who's figured it out and put the spotlight on that person and let them share their story and how they did it. And that's what I'm doing in documentaries, really, is just putting the spotlight on someone else. So I really love doing that, even though I was a theater major in college and I loved being on stage. As I've gotten older, I prefer to be behind the camera.
That's great. Well, what I love about this interview is that I'm giving you a dose of your own medicine here because I became aware of the fact that you have a vlog on YouTube yourself, and I got the idea and presented it to our board with the Antiochian men about doing a series of interviews based on the interviews that you do. I found out about your interview series on your vlog from Father Timothy Bocklig, who just so happens to be my father. And, after you did an interview with him, he actually shared the link to that video with me. He sent it to me in a text, and I watched. It was a great chance to hear my dad talk. I hadn't heard from him in a while. But I was really interested in your vlog specifically. Tell me what you want to accomplish with it and what the goals are for that.
I have a really simple goal, and that's to flood the internet with Orthodox material. That's it. I think, if we focus on that, that we can be noticed in a much quicker way, because sadly, we have remained the same percent of the population in America for the last 100 years. So our numbers have technically grown, but we've stayed less than 1%. And so something needs to shift. And we're in a digital age where we can get our message out to America in a way that was very difficult before. And so that's my number one goal with everything I'm doing, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Facebook, whatever it is related to the internet, is that I want to flood the internet with Orthodox material.
That's great. That's exciting to me, and it's something that I think is a goal that you and I share in common. I didn't expect to be kind of thrust into the position that I was, but I'm feeling very blessed to do that, and I'm even feeling more blessed to know people like you that I can help to achieve that goal, because we're stronger together. I think you would agree.
Yes.
And speaking of just your other works that you've done, I believe you also host a podcast on Ancient Faith Radio. I'm a big fan of Ancient Faith Radio and have heard a lot of podcasts, but I was hoping you would tell us about that podcast and what that experience has been like for you.
It was very humbling at first, because it started with just an interest in evangelism. And so I started doing research and calling everyone I could. And then someone said, you should do a podcast on evangelism. And I said, well, I still feel like I'm learning. I don't feel like I'm the teacher yet. I still feel like a student, very much so. And so I stuck with the idea and decided, okay, I'm just going to convert all of my research, all of these interviews I'm doing, all these phone calls into the podcast so that I can still be the student. And I carried that on for 5 years. I've just taken a step back from it because I'm trying to focus on video. And so at the beginning of this year, we segued from the radio interview, and I'm so thankful for Ancient Faith Radio. They were a big part of my catechesis, I would even say, and they're very edifying, and I'm thankful for everything that everybody does there. And John Maddox, I can't imagine not having Ancient Faith Radio around. But I felt like it was time for me to transition, because that time was so forming for me under that podcast Go Forth, that it was time to move into video interviews. And so earlier this year, we launched what's called Stories That Work. Your dad, he was a guest of one of those episodes. So most Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, I go live on our Antiochian Missions and Evangelism page, and I try to interview someone about a story that has worked in their parish. For your dad, we talked about Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, and he talked about how much of a benefit it was, his concerns, where it worked really well. And so we were able to give, a crash course to anybody that's ever been interested in doing that in their own church, what that kind of looked like, and someone to turn to. So once again, I'm shining the spotlight on someone else. And like you said, I'm not used to being the one interviewed. But, I wanted to continue the interviews because, when I look around our Archdiocese, or I look around even the 2,000 American Orthodox churches, we have all the answers. They're just kind of spread out. And so we need to gather those answers together and share them, those best practices. And so that's one of my favorite things to do. That's been actually the core of my ministry, has been gathering all of the best practices and sharing them. I did it in my podcast. I did it in my book, 100 Natural Ways to Grow a Church. There's not a single idea in that book that's mine. It's 100 other churches. And that's what we're doing now on Facebook with Stories That Work.
That's great. I can't help but be touched by what you were saying, especially about your experience with Ancient Faith Radio. Just to tell everyone personally, I went through a very difficult time in my life a couple of years ago, and I felt very alone, and I didn't feel like I was worthy to even set foot in an Orthodox church at that time in my life. And Ancient Faith Radio, I used as a tool for my own self-education and to feel connected to the church. And I listened to so many podcasts, hundreds of them actually, and it ended up filling this void inside of me. And it ended up being an example of something where I was able to truly replace habitual sins of mine and replace that with something holy. And as I learned more about the Orthodox faith, my faith, that I was embarrassed at the time to say I should have known a lot of what I was learning, it ended up filling me with so much joy and a desire to share it with others. So I'm so encouraged that you and I have some of the same goals, and I'm really looking forward to working more with you. And speaking of, you have clearly so much on your plate right now. You're working on, these videos and so many things. Being a full-time employee of our Archdiocese, I'm sure gives you the time to devote to that. Again, it's motivating and encouraging to hear about all the good works that you're doing. Many of the men that are watching this video right now may be thinking about what they can do to serve the church through Antiochian men. I speak from experience when I say it's extremely rewarding to serve the church, and again, to feel that joy that comes from the good works. But I've also learned it's important to find the proper balance. And I just want to ask, what advice can you give our men about balancing their desire to serve the church with their other responsibilities in their lives?
Two things come to mind. The first one is an urban legend that's not just inside the Orthodox Church. If you look around the Christian world, in most areas, you have men in leadership positions and in ministry positions. It's not 100%, but that's most of it. And these men are taught an urban legend that if they give all of themselves to their ministry, excuse me, whatever that ministry is, that God will take care of their family. And so what ends up happening is these men actually become a little bit like superheroes to their ministry, or whether it's a congregation or a nonprofit they're leading, while their family is kind of suffering. And so this is something I speak to with experience, in that it's very easily for me to get tunnel vision, to become a workaholic, and really believe in the work that I'm doing. And all of a sudden, I'm on the verge of missing dinner with my family if I'm not careful. And then I'm on the verge of missing dinner again. And then I'm on the verge of missing dinner again. And so this is something that our hierarchs in the Antiochian Archdiocese have been very vocal about, is that we need to be family oriented, that it's God first, family second, and then your ministry. And so that's the first thing, that is that, it's not an escape. It's not a way to go do something good and then your kids will be fine. We have to be there for our kids. So that's the first thing I would say, is we need to be careful of this urban legend. The second thing I would say is, and I don't know how many people know this, I did not seek a position with the Archdiocese. I sought to serve, and I was determined to serve. I spent time figuring out where God wanted me. Where did my passion meet God's will, right? And once that settled on evangelism, I was off and running. And within a year, I was offered a position, and I was shocked that I was offered a position as the full-time administrator for the Becoming Truly Human ministry. I didn't even know the position exists. I didn't think that the church should give me a job. I was determined to make my own job. And then you fast forward several years, and I fall in love with movies, and I decide, okay, I'm going to quit and I'm going to go make movies. And so I think I resigned like 5 times. I can't remember how many times I resigned, but they were like, we need you to find a replacement and exit. And so, yeah, I spent a year trying to figure out my exit strategy, because I wanted to go make movies. And during that exit strategy, I got offered another job to make movies for the Archdiocese. And so I've talked with a few men about this who, they want to serve. And I tell them, I said, if your desire to serve means you want the church to give you a job, then you need to rethink your desire to serve. If your desire to serve is that you're going to do it no matter what, God will help you figure out the rest of it. And so those are my 2 keys, is, figure out what it is, that ministry that you want to do, but don't feel like right off the gate, the church should offer you a job, or the nonprofit down the street should offer you a job. Put in your volunteer time. I put in a lot of volunteer time on evangelism. I put in a lot of volunteer time on making my the first 2 movies. And then, because God wanted it to, it turned into a job. It might not have. And for some people, it might not ever turn into a job, and that's okay. But that wasn't my goal when I started out. So I think we have to keep that in mind.
Oh, that's a great response. And it's actually a little bit spooky that you described it like that, because that's very similar to my experience when I was approached for this Antiochian men's office to be president. It's not something I sought out. It's not something I expected would happen. I didn't feel qualified. A lot of the things that you're saying was exactly my experience. And you said it so eloquently when you said trying to find where your passion meets God's will. I think that's a key point there, because so often I know from my experience, I wanted my will. I wanted my will to be what happens. And it wasn't until I really understood that it needs to be aligned with what God wants, things just start falling into place. And that's what's happened to me. And it sounds like it's happened to you. And it's just so refreshing to hear that and to know that my experience is not unique. It's not just me that's gone through something like that. And it's very motivating. I had the pleasure of meeting you at the PLC this summer, and I'm sure you've been to many Parish Life conferences over the years. And can you talk a little bit about what the experience of being at the PLC was like for you this year, and how it may have differed from past PLCs you've attended?
So I have a special place in my heart for PLCs because I met my wife at a PLC. And that's where they were originally created, was for singles to meet each other, and which is still important. We're still such a small part of the population that it can really help you see the universal church to come together at these regional events, where it's a PLC or a conference or a national event. And so what I look forward to at every PLC is seeing my friends. I don't get to see my friends that often. We have an incredible list of clergy in our diocese. I was reviewing it recently, and I just felt so blessed by all the clergy that we have in our diocese. And I love to see them, and I love to hear all of their homilies, and I love to hear them teach, and I love to just be around them. And so that's something that you never know what you're going to get out of a PLC until you show up. It takes a lot of effort. It takes some repositioning of finances and resources and shifting things around. But for me, that's, it has a special place for my wife and I, because it's always nostalgic to go back to that. So that one was particularly different. And then what was the most different for this past PLC was it was the first time I was asked to speak. And I've never been asked to speak at one of our PLCs, and I really didn't want to. It's a lot easier to speak at someone else's PLC, not ours. So that was very daunting, and I hope I took it seriously enough, because it felt like a blessing and an honor to be asked to do that.
That's great. I remember that talk very well. It was very moving. It really resonated with me, and it was actually one of my favorite parts of the PLC this year. And watching immediately after your talk, your documentary "Building Hope," and it was actually shown at one of the dinner events. Would you tell us a little bit about that documentary? What's it about? What was it like to create it?
Yeah, so coming from my Protestant background, mission trips were very important growing up. And we do have Project Mexico, and that's about it right now in terms of mission trips. And so one of the first things that happened when I entered into the Department of Missions Evangelism is I told my boss that I wanted to do something on Project Mexico, because mission trips are important in multiple ways. It's a family serving together. It's doing a hard week of service, and the congregation has to get behind that team. And so it's very difficult for just a handful of people. I guess some people can do it, but typically you're looking at a church-wide effort to send a team of volunteers off to do a mission trip. And so there are just so many different aspects of it, and Project Mexico has demonstrated the value of this so well. For those who are not that familiar with Project Mexico, it's basically a volunteer home building organization combined with, on the same property, an orphanage. They started off just building homes for the homeless in the Tijuana, Mexico area. As they were doing that, they noticed that almost all of the homeless children on the streets were boys, that the girls had a place to go, the boys didn't have a place to go. So that's why they started the home, the orphanage is for the boys, because at that time there was nowhere for them in the Mexican government system. And so you go for a week and you immerse yourself in serving another family with everything you've got. And it's different than camp. Camp is very important that our children get a week or two of a full Orthodox experience. But this mission trip and Building Hope teaches the importance of service, the importance of helping out another human being, whether you know the person or not, and that you can do it with others, such as your friends and family. And so it's just it's the other side of the same coin of, you know, so who do we surround ourselves and what do we spend our time doing?
Right. That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. And I know that documentary is on your vlog on YouTube, and we'll go ahead and post a link to that video in the description of this video and to your vlog as well, so that the men in our diocese can check it out. There's a lot of great content on there. And so hopefully, God willing, that'll be something that all of our men can see and watch and comment on. I know it was incredibly moving to watch that documentary. There was a piece in there about how the volunteers spend about 20 minutes in silence to start the day, something that I started doing after watching that video at the PLC. And it has been a miraculous part of my life to be able to sit and reflect sometimes before I even start my day. So just little things from that video, I think, would really benefit a lot of the men watching this. And I highly recommend it to check that out and the other videos on your vlog as well.
If I could mention,
yeah,
it is up there for free. So we decided to make it free. We try to make everything we can free. We do ask for donations for those who felt like that they would like to be a part of what we're doing, but we don't expect it. And we're going to hopefully continue to make as many free resources as possible so that we can be donor based. That's
great. I appreciate you adding that. Many of the men watching this video already know that there's an upcoming second annual DOMSE Fall Retreat, which is actually going to be hosted at your church at St Ignatius in Franklin, Tennessee. I realize you may not know a lot of the specifics of the retreat, and I think that they're working to finalize that right now. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the retreat will be like and why it's important for especially the men in our diocese to attend these kinds of events, and how it's different from a parish life conference, what the benefits are to attending these in-person retreats.
So I have three things I'd like to say there. The first one is, if you haven't been to St. Ignatius in Franklin, Tennessee, you need to come see it. It's 20 acres. And we're down in a valley, and we have several acres dedicated to blueberry bushes. And it's beautiful. It's just incredible to drive around the corner and see this church down in the valley in the hills of Tennessee. So the property lends itself to rest and relaxation, which is what you want with a retreat. We have icon stations around the property where if someone wants to take a break and go for a walk, they can go spend some time in contemplation and prayer in front of the icon stations. The second thing that I think is good for retreats, and this is very important, is that Bishop Nicholas said that at this fall retreat, there will be no meetings. It will be a 100% pure retreat. And all the men I know, I never speak for women, but all the men I know, they don't want more meetings. So, you know, this is really important for the men to come and experience a weekend retreat and be edified by some gifted speakers who can share some things that are important to us. The third thing that I would say is that I want men to come to these retreats, even if it's a little difficult right now, to help spawn off regional and deanery retreats. It is difficult to get to a diocesan retreat, but the more that we can participate in our bishop's vision, the more he will see the value that we could do this and have some regional and deanery retreats that are easier to get to. And so that's a third thing that I think could be a lot of value. He sees the value in retreats. He's new to our diocese. He's trying to give us some spiritual edification, and we're thankful for that. And so retreats across the board, this is a key part of what our Department of Missions Evangelism is also working on. We have a whole page dedicated to retreats that are available and our retreat speakers, because a retreat, it almost is like a small visit to a monastery. We don't always get to visit the monastery, but we can bring that spirituality to us in the form of retreat and a speaker and some time together, and for contemplation, for reflection, for silence. And so that's why I look forward to these. And so I'm hoping that even though we're kind of far away from some of those, maybe in Florida or on the coast over Myrtle Beach, that we make this effort, we see the value of it, and that this spawns more and more retreats in our diocese.
That's great. Thank you for that answer. That's right on. I'm really excited myself to go to this coming retreat, and I know the value that's there for anyone that attends. It can really help you not only deepen your faith, but just be in fellowship with other men from all across the region, from other churches. It's a great opportunity to learn from others, to be, in community, in that larger sense of community that our diocese is. And it's just such a beautiful thing. I had the pleasure of visiting St. Ignatius in Franklin on my long road trip driving to Raleigh for the PLC. I actually stopped by and had a couple of other guys with me, my wife as well. And we stopped in the church, and I can just say it is an incredible facility that you have there. I also particularly love how the new church building is right next to the original church building, and it's part of that larger complex. And I think the original church building is used for catechism, if I'm not mistaken. And I just really enjoyed visiting, and it made me excited that's going to be the location of that fall retreat. So I'm looking forward to being there myself, to getting to know some of the men from St. Ignatius and others that are able to make the trip. But particularly for St. Ignatius, since you're located there, I was hoping you could give us an idea of the group of men from your church, what they're like, some of the things that you all have done together, maybe some best practices, and then maybe if you can comment on what you personally would like to see us as the Antiochian Men's Organization focus on at the diocese level.
So our men's group mostly likes to get together and eat and have fellowship. And we've done a number of service projects over the years at our church. We try not to be pigeonholed into being solely handymen, because we like to spend time together. And so some projects, lend themselves where we can have a group of men come together, work on something, and it's fellowship at the same time. Sometimes we just go out to dinner. And we've had some of those dinners at our church and have the food brought in, which some of our men liked. We've had some of those at restaurants, which some of our men liked. We've had a guest speaker, which some of our men liked. And the routine theme that you're hearing is that you have to have a variety of things to reach your spectrum of men. And so there's not really one thing that I would say that we focused on. If I look back over the years at the men of St. Ignatius, what I see is that we have a variety of men at different stages of their life who are available in different ways, interested in different things. And so by rotating what's happening, whether it's a service event or eating together or whatever that is, we're rotating the interest level. So we're constantly coming back around with something that might interest someone. I think that's the biggest key, because if you're 27 years old and you've got a 2-year-old at home and there's a men's breakfast and your wife's like, you've already been gone 5 days this week and now you're leaving again, it's a little harder for him to hit some of those events. Whereas the guy that's 60 and all his kids are at college, that's not hard for him. So when we say we want our young men involved, we have to think about the family. And so the more family events we have, the more likely we are going to have the men involved. And that comes from relationships, that comes from spending time with those men. What I say is if you're someone that wants more men involved, go to those men. If you've got John Doe in your church that you like John seems to have a good heart, he's got things going on, but he doesn't seem to show up, go to John. Say, hey, John, can I come over? Can we go get some coffee? Can I bring over dinner one night for you and your wife? Do things that show that, put some action in that caring of wanting them involved and connecting, and you'll be surprised. The other thing I'll say to that, the last thing I'll say is, and this is probably the most important thing, that's why I saved it to the last, is pay attention to when a man is hurting. When a man is hurting, it's kind of sad how many people don't reach out. We need to reach out. When we know a man is hurting, I always reach out. I don't have control of whether or not they're going to take me up on my offer. But I can always say, let me know if you want to call me. Let me know if you want to talk, if you want to get coffee. You know, I'm always up for a beer, always. I'll buy. And you know what? 9 out of 10 times they might say no, thank you. But I guarantee you it meant something to them, even if they say no. And eventually they will say yes. And so if you want to build a men's ministry, a lot of it has to do with reaching out with those who are afflicted. And they're not involved because they're afflicted, and they may be afflicted in a way that we don't see. And so the more that we can remove the shame, remove the guilt, and be a healing presence, be present, just be thankful to be in their presence. That's what I want to see from our men's group, from every men's group, is that the men feel ministered to by the other men.
That's very well said, and it's great advice. That's very helpful to me, especially, and I'm sure a lot of men that are watching this video. And Deacon Adam, on behalf of all the Antiochian men, we all thank you for your time today. It is truly a blessing to get to know you better, and we appreciate all the good works that you're doing in our Archdiocese. I want to especially personally thank you because a lot of what you shared today resonated with me personally, and I think a lot of your responses to my questions will go a long way to help the men in our diocese.
Glory to God.
To all Antiochian men out there, stay tuned. We have more interviews coming on our YouTube channel. Remember to like the video and to click on subscribe so you can be notified when new videos are posted on our channel. Also, as a reminder, our second annual DOMSE Fall Retreat is just around the corner. It will be September 6th and 7th in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. And we will post the details of that retreat in the description of this video on our YouTube channel. And I hope to see many of you there. The details are still being finalized, but as we learn more, we'll definitely keep everyone updated. And I hope you all, until the next time we speak, have a blessed week. And thank you for watching the video.